The fastest way to discover who truly owns a ballroom is to insult the woman carrying the empty champagne glasses. Snow drifted softly beyond the towering windows of the Halstead Grand Hotel, while Midtown Manhattan shimmered beneath thousands of white holiday lights reflected across wet streets and slow-moving black sedans below. Inside the Winter Legacy Gala, crystal chandeliers glowed like floating constellations above polished marble floors where politicians, hedge fund executives, celebrity donors, and luxury investors moved through waves of live piano music and quiet conversation wrapped in perfume, cashmere, and expensive confidence. Silver trays floated through the crowd beside sparkling champagne towers, while photographers captured smiling socialites beneath towering arrangements of white roses and gold ribbon imported from Paris earlier that afternoon. Vivian Hale balanced a tray of empty crystal flutes against one hip, while weaving carefully between tables near the Eastern Ballroom entrance. Her black service uniform blended almost invisibly into the elegance surrounding her, which was exactly how most wealthy guests preferred service staff to exist during events like this. Seen only when needed, forgotten immediately after. Near the center stage, Amelia Royce stood surrounded by board members from Royce Industries, while cameras flashed against the sequin fabric of her ivory designer gown. She carried herself like someone raised beneath permanent applause. Even the way she lifted her champagne glass seemed rehearsed for magazine covers. Make sure the investors from Zurich stay near the acquisition team after the keynote, Amelia instructed an event coordinator without bothering to lower her voice. And somebody fix the lighting near the donor staircase. It looks cheap. Vivian passed quietly behind the group toward the catering corridor when a waiter rushing from the kitchen accidentally clipped her shoulder. One champagne flute tipped sideways. Pale gold liquid splashed across the lower edge of Amelia's gown. Silence spread instantly beneath the orchestra music. Several nearby guests froze mid-conversation while camera flashes stopped around the ballroom perimeter. Amelia stared down at the stain in disbelief before slowly lifting her eyes toward Vivian. "Are you serious?" she asked sharply. Vivian immediately reached for a linen cloth from her apron pocket. "I am very sorry, ma'am." Amelia stepped backward as though Vivian carried something contagious instead of a napkin. "Do not touch me." The surrounding executives pretended discomfort without intervening. Vivian remained calm despite dozens of eyes now locked onto her beneath the glittering ballroom lights. Amelia laughed once under her breath before speaking louder this time. "This is exactly why staff should stay away from important guests." A few people nearby exchanged awkward smiles while pretending not to listen. Vivian lowered the cloth slowly. Somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, elevator chimes echoed softly through the marble corridors, while snow continued falling across Manhattan outside. Amelia looked Vivian over one final time with cold amusement settling across her face. "Honestly," she said, lifting her champagne glass again, "you should not even be allowed near people like us." The orchestra resumed playing barely 30 seconds after the champagne incident, but the atmosphere around Amelia Royce remained tense beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and mirrored balcony panels overlooking the ballroom. Wealthy guests drifted carefully back into conversation while pretending nothing uncomfortable had happened, though several executives still glanced quietly toward Vivian Hale as she disappeared through the velvet service doors near the eastern corridor carrying her tray of empty glasses with steady hands. Beyond the ballroom, the hotel's private operations hallways felt cooler and quieter, filled with the muted sounds of rolling catering carts, elevator bells, and distant kitchen staff calling table numbers beneath warm copper lighting mounted along cream-colored walls. The scent of rosemary butter, espresso, and polished wood replaced the perfume-heavy air lingering inside the gala itself. Vivian entered the service staging room where dozens of servers rotated between banquet assignments beside towering silver racks stacked with dinnerware and crystal champagne flutes waiting for the midnight toast. A gray-haired security supervisor named Leonard Brooks looked up immediately when she walked in. "You all right?" he asked softly while reviewing guest credentials on a tablet near the corridor entrance. Vivian placed the empty tray carefully onto a prep counter. "I have had worse evenings." Leonard studied her expression for another moment before quietly adjusting his suit jacket. "The board members from Boston arrived early. They are asking for revised seating access." Vivian nodded once without hesitation. "Move the Ellington group to the South Terrace section beside the donor balcony. Keep the Zurich delegation away from the acquisition press table until after the keynote speech." Two younger event coordinators nearby immediately updated their seating charts after hearing her instructions. None of them questioned why a busgirl understood donor logistics better than the executive planners upstairs. Vivian crossed into the rear inventory office where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked snowy Manhattan streets glowing beneath rows of holiday lights, wrapped around bare trees lining Fifth Avenue. She opened a leather operations binder resting beside several embossed gala invitations, while reviewing guest movement reports and vendor timing schedules with calm precision. Upstairs, Amelia Royce continued entertaining investors beneath golden ballroom lighting, while photographers captured images of luxury gowns and diamond jewelry against the backdrop of the Winter Legacy Foundation logo projected across the stage curtains. Amelia loved being seen at events like this because attention followed her naturally. What she never noticed were the invisible systems underneath the glamour keeping evenings like this from collapsing entirely. Downstairs, Vivian quietly adjusted staffing rotations after noticing several catering workers had missed scheduled meal breaks during setup hours. She approved additional service runners near the mezzanine bars and rerouted late-arriving floral deliveries away from the press entrance before returning the operations binder to its shelf. As she stepped back into the hallway, a young server approached nervously carrying a tray of untouched champagne glasses. Miss Royce said no staff should enter the donor lounge unless spoken to directly, the girl whispered. Vivian looked toward the ballroom entrance where laughter echoed faintly beneath the orchestra music upstairs. Then she took one champagne flute from the tray and offered the young server a reassuring smile. People who need reminders about dignity usually understand the least about power. By 10:30 that evening, the Winter Legacy Gala had transformed from a charity celebration into something closer to a private marketplace, wrapped in velvet and candlelight. Billion-dollar acquisition conversations unfolded beside ice sculptures carved with the Royce Industries logo while investment attorneys, luxury developers, and international donors drifted between ballroom lounges carrying crystal tumblers filled with 12-year scotch and sparkling water imported from the Italian Alps. Outside the towering hotel windows, fresh snow softened the sharp edges of Manhattan traffic below while Central Park disappeared beneath pale white fog, illuminated by passing headlights and glowing holiday displays. Inside the mezzanine donor lounge, a string quartet replaced the earlier piano set, their music floating gently above the low murmur of negotiations happening beneath gold-paneled ceilings and towering arrangements of winter orchids. Vivian Hale moved quietly through the upper balcony corridor carrying updated guest authorization envelopes, while security teams adjusted access barriers ahead of several high-profile arrivals from London and San Francisco. Along the walls, framed black and white photographs documented decades of Winter Legacy Foundation galas, attended by senators, philanthropists, and media dynasties stretching back nearly 50 years. Vivian paused briefly near the donor registry desk after noticing a discrepancy on the digital occupancy roster displayed beside the lounge entrance. 3 unverified media credentials had somehow been approved through Amelia Royce's private authorization list despite restricted investor clearance rules attached to the acquisition. Briefing scheduled later that night. Leonard Brooks approached from the security elevator, while adjusting his earpiece beneath the warm amber lighting reflecting across the marble corridor. "Those credentials were pushed through 20 minutes ago," he explained quietly. Vivian studied the roster another moment. "Without governance review?" Leonard nodded once. "Directly from Miss Royce's office." Downstairs, applause suddenly erupted from the ballroom as Amelia finished introducing Royce Industries' expansion initiative, beside a glowing presentation screen overlooking hundreds of seated guests beneath cascading crystal light. Vivian glanced through the balcony railing toward the stage below where Amelia stood smiling confidently beside executives and photographers capturing every polished movement. The room loved her because she represented wealth that looked effortless. What nobody downstairs noticed yet was how quickly fragile systems begin cracking when entitlement overrides protocol. Near the donor lounge entrance, one of the catering assistants accidentally brushed against a wealthy investor while collecting empty glasses from a side table. The investor barely reacted, but Amelia noticed immediately from across the mezzanine after stepping away from the stage area. "Can someone please train the service staff before they embarrass us again?" she snapped loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. The young assistant froze beneath the attention while lowering her eyes toward the marble floor. Several donors exchanged uncomfortable glances before pretending renewed interest in their drinks and conversations. Vivian stepped toward the assistant calmly and removed the tray from her shaking hands. Amelia recognized her instantly. A faint smile crossed her face, colder this time beneath the soft chandelier glow overhead. "Still wondering where you do not belong?" she asked. Vivian looked toward the unauthorized credentials still glowing across the donor registry screen nearby before meeting Amelia's eyes again. Sometimes the people least noticed are the only ones paying attention when rules begin breaking. Amelia laughed lightly and turned away toward another group of investors without realizing 3 foundation compliance advisors standing near the balcony entrance had just overheard every word. Near midnight, the upper levels of the Halstead Grand Hotel felt almost detached from the ballroom celebration unfolding several floors below. The distant sound of string music and polite applause faded into muted echoes beneath thick carpeted corridors lined with antique mirrors, brass sconces, and framed oil paintings donated decades earlier by old Manhattan families whose names still carried weight across finance, politics, and philanthropy circles. Snow pressed softly against the tall arched windows overlooking Central Park, while warm amber light reflected across polished mahogany doors leading toward private foundation offices rarely accessed during public events. Vivian Hale climbed the curved staircase beside the eastern mezzanine carrying a slim leather folio beneath one arm, while Gala guests downstairs prepared for the midnight donor auction. The hallway above the ballroom remained nearly empty except for 2 older security personnel stationed quietly near a frosted glass doorway, embossed with gold lettering reading Winter Legacy Foundation Administrative Archives. Both men straightened slightly the moment Vivian approached. One of them immediately unlocked the door without needing explanation. Inside, the archive office resembled an old Manhattan law library, more than a hotel administrative suite. Floor-to-ceiling walnut shelves held decades of donor agreements, property deeds, executive trust records, and handwritten correspondence preserved beneath soft museum lighting. A fire crackled quietly inside a marble fireplace near the far wall, while snowflakes drifted beyond the dark city skyline outside. Vivian crossed toward a long central table where several embossed folders already waited beside a silver tray holding untouched tea service and crystal water glasses. Resting at the center sat the original governance charter of the Winter Legacy Foundation. She opened the leather folio and reviewed updated compliance reports connected to tonight's gala. Unauthorized credential approvals, executive conduct concerns, donor access violations, staff mistreatment documented by event supervisors and security observers throughout the evening. None of it surprised her anymore. Across the room, an elderly woman wearing a deep navy evening suit looked up from a stack of financial reports near the fireplace. Eleanor Whitcomb had chaired the foundation board for almost 20 years and carried the kind of quiet authority that made senators lower their voices instinctively. "The Royce girl is becoming reckless," she said calmly. Vivian continued reviewing the compliance records beneath the warm glow of the library lamps. "She mistakes visibility for ownership." Eleanor gave a faint smile at that answer before sliding another document across the table. "The acquisition partners are requesting emergency review authority after tonight's conduct reports." Vivian glanced toward the signature line, attached to the foundation governance addendum. Her own name appeared there already beneath the title acting trustee of the Hale Endowment. Downstairs, Amelia Royce continued greeting donors beneath the chandeliers, completely unaware that the foundation controlling nearly 60% of the gala's operational funding had never belonged to the Royce family at all. The Winter Legacy Foundation existed because Vivian's grandfather built it decades earlier through quiet real estate acquisitions and charitable trusts, hidden beneath layers of corporate restructuring most public investors never understood. The Gala ballroom, the hotel partnership agreements, the donor authorization systems, even portions of the Royce Industries acquisition financing tied back indirectly to the Hale Endowment network. Vivian closed the folder slowly, while snow continued falling beyond the tall windows overlooking Manhattan below. "If Amelia violates one more governance condition tonight," Eleanor asked carefully, "would you like the board to intervene formally?" Vivian looked toward the ballroom lights glowing faintly beneath the archive floor beneath them. Then she answered with complete calm, "No. Let her continue speaking freely. People usually reveal themselves fastest when they believe nobody important is watching." The midnight auction transformed the grand ballroom into a theater of controlled wealth beneath towering crystal chandeliers, and cascading gold curtains glowing against the dark Manhattan skyline beyond the hotel windows. Snow continued drifting across Central Park outside while guests settled into velvet-back chairs arranged around the central stage where silent auction screens displayed rising bids tied to scholarships, redevelopment grants, and international arts funding sponsored through the Winter Legacy Foundation. Waiters carrying silver trays threaded carefully through clusters of executives wrapped in tailored tuxedos and jewel-toned evening gowns, while soft candlelight reflected across polished champagne glasses and diamond bracelets resting against linen-covered tables. Amelia Royce stood near the front donor section laughing beside two venture capital investors, while photographers continued capturing images for financial magazines and society pages scheduled to publish the following morning. The confidence surrounding her had only grown stronger after the acquisition presentation earlier that night. She moved through the ballroom like someone who believed every room automatically adjusted itself around her presence. Near the donor balcony entrance, Vivian Hale reviewed final guest authorization updates with Leonard Brooks while foundation advisors monitored incoming transfers connected to the charity auction totals climbing rapidly across digital display boards. One of the compliance analysts quietly approached Vivian carrying a tablet filled with governance notifications triggered throughout the evening. Additional unauthorized access approvals just appeared under Amelia Royce's credentials, the analyst explained softly. Vivian scanned the report beneath the warm chandelier light. Amelia had granted restricted donor lounge privileges to several private acquaintances unrelated to the foundation or acquisition review process. Worse still, she authorized alcohol service extensions beyond executive hospitality regulations attached to the Gala charter. Across the ballroom, laughter erupted near the center staircase where Amelia now posed beside a group of social media influencers invited without proper foundation clearance. Vivian closed the report calmly. "Document everything," she said quietly. A few moments later, Amelia crossed the ballroom floor carrying a crystal coupe glass filled with pale champagne, while live violin music floated through the crowded room beneath the glow of winter floral arrangements towering above the stage. She noticed Vivian immediately standing beside the donor access terminal, and rolled her eyes before approaching. "You again," Amelia said with amused irritation. "Do you ever stop hovering around places meant for actual decision-makers?" Several nearby guests lowered their voices instinctively while pretending interest in the auction screens nearby. Vivian remained composed. "Your unauthorized guest approvals are violating foundation governance rules." Amelia laughed openly this time. "Foundation rules?" She glanced toward her friends with theatrical disbelief. "My father practically funds this entire event." Vivian looked steadily at her beneath the chandelier reflections shimmering across the marble floor. "Not entirely." Amelia ignored the comment and took another sip of champagne before speaking louder. "You know what your problem is? People like you forget service staff are replaceable." The surrounding conversations nearby grew quieter now. Even the violinists on stage seemed distant beneath the growing tension around the donor section. Amelia leaned slightly closer with cold amusement lingering behind her smile. "If I wanted," she said softly, "I could have security remove you from this gala in less than 60 seconds. Nearby foundation advisors exchanged silent glances while Leonard Brooks straightened subtly near the ballroom entrance. Vivian studied Amelia for a long moment before answering calmly. "That only works when the room actually belongs to you." Amelia smirked dismissively and turned back toward her guests without realizing the compliance board beside the donor terminal had just shifted from internal observation status to formal governance review. Just after 12:30 in the morning, the energy inside the Winter Legacy Gala shifted almost imperceptibly beneath the polished elegance of the ballroom. The auction continued smoothly on stage while wealthy donors raised illuminated bidding paddles beside towering candle arrangements and white orchids glowing beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters carried silver dessert trays through the aisles as a jazz ensemble replaced the earlier string quartet with slow brass melodies that drifted warmly across the crowded room. Outside the hotel windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath fresh snowfall while lines of black cars reflected across rain-darkened streets wrapping around Central Park. Yet beneath the glamour, the invisible operational structure supporting the gala had quietly begun changing direction. Near the donor access terminal, Leonard Brooks received a secure notification through his hotel credentials tablet, before glancing immediately toward Vivian Hale standing beside the marble balcony, railing overlooking the ballroom floor below. Around them, foundation advisors and venue directors straightened subtly as updated governance instructions appeared simultaneously across event management systems tied to the Winter Legacy Foundation network. Access permissions, security routing authority, donor clearance oversight. Several operational controls previously assigned through Amelia Royce's executive privileges were now being rerouted automatically through Foundation governance review. Amelia noticed the shift almost instantly when one of the private bartenders politely informed her that alcohol extensions for the mezzanine lounge had been suspended pending compliance confirmation. "Excuse me?" Amelia asked sharply beneath the chandelier glow while several investors nearby paused mid-conversation. "I approved those extensions personally." The bartender lowered his voice carefully. "The authorization changed, ma'am." Across the ballroom, another event coordinator approached Amelia moments later explaining that several of her invited guests no longer possessed access credentials for the restricted acquisition lounge upstairs. Confusion flickered briefly across Amelia's face before irritation replaced it completely. "Who changed the permissions?" she demanded. Nobody answered immediately. Instead, several staff members instinctively looked toward Vivian standing calmly beside the donor balcony, while reviewing a leather governance folder beneath the warm golden lighting reflecting off the marble columns nearby. Amelia followed their attention and stared in disbelief. "This is ridiculous," she snapped while crossing the ballroom floor toward her. Nearby conversations quieted subtly again as wealthy guests sensed tension spreading beneath the carefully controlled social atmosphere. "Did you do this?" Amelia demanded once she reached the balcony area. Vivian closed the folder slowly while snow continued drifting outside the tall windows behind her. Foundation governance protocols activated after repeated compliance violations. Amelia laughed harshly. "You are a server carrying trays through hallways." Leonard Brooks stepped forward carefully before she could continue. "Miss Hale currently holds acting trustee authority over operational governance tied to this event." Silence settled instantly around the donor balcony beneath the soft jazz music echoing through the ballroom. Several executives nearby lowered their champagne glasses, while Foundation advisors remained perfectly still beside the marble staircase entrance. Amelia looked from Leonard back toward Vivian with visible disbelief beginning to fracture her composure for the first time all evening. "That is not possible," she whispered. Vivian met her eyes steadily. "The ballroom stopped belonging to your assumptions several hours ago." Across the room, security supervisors quietly repositioned themselves near restricted access corridors, while updated authorization credentials continued refreshing across hotel systems in real time. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody created a scene. Yet one by one, the gala itself had started obeying Vivian instead of Amelia, and every powerful person inside the room could already feel the difference. By 1:15 in the morning, the Winter Legacy Gala no longer felt entirely celebratory despite the warm music and glittering luxury surrounding the ballroom. Beneath the towering chandeliers, conversations had grown quieter and more cautious as donors, executives, and foundation advisors sensed an invisible shift unfolding across the evening, without fully understanding its source yet. Waiters continued refilling crystal glasses while candlelight shimmered across polished marble and mirrored walls, but attention now drifted repeatedly toward the donor balcony where Amelia Royce stood rigid beside several confused investors, while security personnel quietly updated access permissions throughout the venue. Snow continued falling softly outside the massive hotel windows overlooking Manhattan, wrapping the city in pale silver reflections beneath the midnight skyline. At the center stage, the auctioneer attempted to maintain momentum through the final fundraising presentations, while jazz musicians played low instrumental arrangements near the orchestra platform. Yet even the performers seemed aware that the emotional temperature inside the ballroom had changed completely. Amelia crossed the room again with visible frustration tightening across her posture as several guests subtly stepped aside to avoid being caught inside the tension surrounding her. She stopped directly in front of Vivian Hale near the marble staircase leading toward the restricted donor mezzanine. "Enough," Amelia snapped quietly, though the sharpness in her voice still carried across the nearby tables. "Whatever little authority game this is, it ends now." Vivian remained composed beneath the chandelier glow, while Foundation advisors observed silently nearby. "This is not a game," she answered calmly. Amelia gestured angrily toward the security terminals where revised credentials continued refreshing across the hotel systems. You embarrassed me in front of my father's investors. Leonard Brooks stepped slightly closer near the staircase entrance, while two additional hotel security supervisors arrived beside the donor access corridor, without drawing attention to themselves. Amelia noticed them immediately. What exactly is happening? She demanded. Vivian opened the leather governance folder in her hands and removed a single embossed document, bearing the seal of the Winter Legacy Foundation. Under Section 14 of the Gala Charter, she explained evenly, executive guests violating donor governance, staff conduct protections, and restricted authorization policies may temporarily lose event privileges pending board review. Amelia stared at her in disbelief. You cannot seriously think that applies to me. Several nearby donors lowered their voices completely now while cameras from society photographers subtly shifted toward the staircase area, sensing something significant unfolding beneath the elegance of the evening. Vivian met Amelia's eyes steadily before answering. The policies exist specifically so they apply to everyone. Silence settled heavily beneath the soft jazz music drifting across the ballroom floor. Then Eleanor Whitcomb descended the marble staircase from the upper archive level, accompanied by two Foundation legal advisors carrying governance binders embossed with the Hale Endowment seal. Guests immediately recognized her. Conversation stopped almost entirely near the donor section. Eleanor looked toward Amelia with calm disappointment rather than anger. Miss Royce, she said quietly, the board has voted to suspend your operational authority within tonight's gala effective immediately. Amelia blinked once as if the sentence itself made no logical sense. You are removing me from my own event? Eleanor's expression never changed. This was never your event. Nearby security supervisors received silent confirmation through their earpieces moments later. The donor access gates locked softly behind them with a muted electronic tone barely audible beneath the orchestra music. Vivian stepped aside calmly, while Leonard approached Amelia with respectful professionalism. Ma'am, he said gently, we are prepared to escort you to the private exit lounge. No shouting followed. No dramatic confrontation erupted beneath the chandeliers. The humiliation came from something far colder. Every powerful person in the ballroom watched Amelia Royce realize, in complete silence, that the room no longer recognized her as the woman in control. Nearly 40 minutes after Amelia Royce disappeared through the private exit corridor accompanied by hotel security, the ballroom slowly exhaled the tension that had gripped it beneath the chandeliers. Conversations returned cautiously at first, carried by the low warmth of jazz piano drifting across the stage while servers refreshed candlelit tables with espresso cups, miniature pastries, and crystal water glasses for guests remaining through the final donor presentations. Outside the towering windows of the Halstead Grand Hotel, snow continued falling across Manhattan in slow silver waves while traffic lights reflected red and gold across the wet avenues surrounding Central Park below. The city looked quieter from above, softened by winter weather and the late hour, though the ballroom itself still shimmered with expensive fabrics, polished marble, and muted conversations between people accustomed to influence. Vivian Hale stepped away from the donor balcony and crossed through the quieter northern corridor lined with velvet drapes and antique brass sconces glowing against dark walnut walls. For the first time all evening, nobody stopped her to question where she belonged. Event coordinators nodded respectfully as she passed. Security supervisors adjusted their posture instinctively. Even several board members lowered their voices when speaking to her near the mezzanine entrance. The invisible hierarchy inside the gala had completely reorganized itself after the governance ruling became public. Vivian eventually climbed the narrow rooftop access staircase above the archive offices where cold winter air greeted her the moment the heavy steel door opened toward the terrace overlooking Midtown Manhattan. Snowflakes drifted across the rooftop garden surrounding the private executive lounge, while the skyline stretched endlessly beyond rows of glowing office towers and slow-moving headlights tracing the avenues below. Heated lanterns flickered softly beside stone benches dusted in fresh snow. Vivian rested both hands along the iron railing facing Central Park, while distant sirens echoed faintly somewhere downtown. The cold air carried traces of chimney smoke, wet pavement, and roasted chestnuts drifting upward from late-night food carts several stories below street level. A few minutes later, Eleanor Whitcomb stepped onto the terrace carrying 2 porcelain coffee cups balanced carefully against the winter wind. "You handled tonight with more restraint than most board members would have managed," she said quietly while offering Vivian one of the cups. Steam curled upward between them beneath the pale rooftop lights. Vivian looked down toward the glowing ballroom windows below where donors and executives still moved through the gala beneath layers of wealth and performance. "Humiliating people publicly rarely teaches them anything useful," she answered softly. Eleanor studied her for a moment before leaning lightly against the railing beside her. "Your grandfather used to say almost the exact same thing." Snow settled gently across the rooftop garden, while distant music from the ballroom drifted upward through the cold Manhattan air below them. For several quiet moments neither woman spoke. Then Eleanor glanced toward Vivian with thoughtful curiosity. "You could have revealed yourself at the beginning of the evening." Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm porcelain cup, while watching snow collect across the tops of black cars moving slowly through the city streets beneath them. "People behave more honestly when they believe someone beneath them has no power at all." Downstairs, the gala continued without Amelia Royce for the first time in years, and somehow the evening felt calmer, kinder, and far less fragile than before. Beneath the glow of winter Manhattan, Vivian finally understood something her grandfather spent decades trying to teach quietly through actions instead of speeches. The strongest authority inside any room rarely belonged to the loudest person standing in it. 3 weeks after the Winter Legacy Gala, Manhattan entered the quiet stretch between Christmas and New Year's Eve, when snow lingered along the sidewalks beside steaming subway grates and department store windows still glowing with fading holiday displays. The Halstead Grand Hotel prepared for another charity season beneath soft winter sunlight reflecting across the marble lobby floors where fresh white orchids replaced the elaborate gala arrangements from earlier that month. Staff members moved through the building with calmer energy now, no longer carrying the nervous tension that had followed Amelia Royce through every corridor and ballroom entrance for years. Vivian Hale stood near the eastern balcony overlooking the restored Grand Ballroom, while reviewing updated foundation schedules, inside a slim leather portfolio embossed with the Hale Endowment seal. Below her, servers arranged crystal glassware across linen-covered tables for a children's scholarship luncheon scheduled later that afternoon. The scent of fresh coffee, polished cedar, and vanilla candles drifted gently through the open ballroom while soft piano music echoed beneath the chandeliers. Everything felt quieter now, more human. Leonard Brooks approached beside the balcony railing carrying 2 printed staffing reports beneath one arm. "You know the employees downstairs keep talking about what happened that night," he said with faint amusement. Vivian glanced toward the ballroom floor where a young catering assistant laughed comfortably beside one of the senior coordinators while arranging silver dessert trays. "People enjoy dramatic stories," she answered softly. Leonard shook his head once. "No. They talk because for the first time somebody important defended the staff instead of protecting the powerful guest causing problems." Vivian said nothing for several moments. Outside the massive ballroom windows, snow drifted slowly across Fifth Avenue while taxis moved through the pale gray afternoon below. Finally she closed the portfolio gently against the railing. "My grandfather used to tell me something when I was young," she said quietly. "He believed the true character of any institution is revealed by how it treats the people nobody notices." Leonard smiled faintly before excusing himself toward the service corridor. Vivian remained alone at the balcony another moment while the ballroom staff continued preparing the afternoon event beneath the warm chandelier glow. Nobody downstairs seemed afraid anymore. Nobody rushed nervously when executives entered the room. The atmosphere carried dignity instead of intimidation. That mattered more to her than public revenge ever could. Near the ballroom entrance, one of the younger servers accidentally dropped a polished silver fork onto the marble floor with a sharp metallic sound that echoed briefly through the room. The girl immediately froze in embarrassment before bending quickly to retrieve it. Vivian walked downstairs herself, picked up the fallen utensil, and handed it back with a calm, reassuring smile. "It happens," she said gently. The young server relaxed instantly. Nearby, several hotel employees exchanged surprised looks after watching the interaction. Most executives who pass through the Halstead Grand rarely notice workers unless something went wrong. Vivian noticed everything. As the scholarship guests slowly began arriving through the lobby beneath drifting snowflakes outside the revolving glass doors, the ballroom lights shimmered warmly across polished glass, silver trays and fresh white roses while Manhattan glowed softly beyond the towering windows. And for the first time in years, the grand room no longer belonged to ego, entitlement, or fear. It belonged to the people who kept it standing long after the wealthy guests finally went home.